On a recent flight from Hamburg, Germany to Minneapolis, I had two unexpected things happen along the way. The first being an aborted landing while approaching Paris Charles de Gaulle. We had already begun our descent when the captain quickly steered the plane back up into the sky. We took a sharp turn directly over the airport and I was able to zoom in and see this plane stopped on the middle of the runway with emergency vehicles all around it. No idea what was going on, but we circled back around and then landed on a different runway about 20 minutes later. I spent a lot of time flying, but I've never experienced an aborted landing before. Have you? Then, when I was walking through the turnstiles for the long-haul portion of my journey, I scanned my premium economy ticket, the machine beeped, and printed out a seat change into business class. That has also never happened to me before.
Can't believe this is happening to me right now. I'm almost getting tears in my eyes.
The only other time I have ever flown in business class was this past January from Orlando to Amsterdam, and since this time I was on an AirFrance flight and the Orlando flight was on Delta, I thought I would take the opportunity to compare the two experiences side by side and let you know what I think AirFrance did better and which points go to Delta. I'm Morgan from the very unofficial travel guides. I've been making travel videos for over 15 years now of popular and not so popular tourist destinations to give you a very honest, unofficial look at what it's like to be there. And I also wrote a little book called Getting Stitches on a Cruise Ship. It's available on Amazon now. Okay, let's take a look at the first impression of the seats. Overall, the AirFrance seats seemed much more streamlined and artistically designed, which is kind of what you would expect when you think of France or Paris, that the look is very important. Of course, one thing that is so great about business class on any flight is that you have so much extra space. Not only for your body, but also for your stuff. I had this entire overhead bin just for my backpack. If we take a look at the Delta seat, I think the amount of space is basically the same, but Delta's suites, as they're called, are a little chunkier and have more right angles. The best comparison I have is the AirFrance is like the Apple-designed version of a business class seat, and the Delta seat is more like the Windows-designed version. Same functions, just totally different look and design. The bedding on AirFrance was surprisingly basic, and it did not seem elevated or special when compared to premium economy or maybe even just economy from the presentation, whereas on Delta, the bedding came in its own separate cloth bag that you had to zip open, and the amenities kit was placed on top of it. On AirFrance, the amenities kit was given to me separately when the flight attendant came to introduce herself. The amenities inside the kit on AirFrance were from Clarins and Bucotherm and included 2 different moisturizers, a toothbrush, and toothpaste, which is pretty standard. There were socks on AirFrance that were basically throwaway one-use fabric. On Delta, there was a hand cream and a lip balm and also a toothbrush kit, and even though I didn't get a picture of them, the socks on Delta I still have them. They were much nicer than AirFrance. I kind of liked the AirFrance products better because I don't need a lip balm, but I liked the look of the Delta products better. One thing that seemed very different to me was the entertainment system. On AirFrance, the screen was set into the seat in front of me and had to be released by pressing a button to get it to face me directly. It seemed somewhat smaller than the Delta screen, but on AirFrance, you could control it by using the touchscreen or a remote that looked a lot like a PSP, don't you think? Anyone else see the resemblance here? The Delta screen was definitely bigger and seemed more modern, and I would say the selection of movies and TV shows was the same on both flights, no big difference there. One thing that was very different was the seat controls. On AirFrance, the controls were very basic with just these 4 buttons to recline the seat, move the footrest, or lay it down, and it took me a while to figure out that this button moved the seat forwards towards the screen and backwards. The seat controls on Delta looked much more complicated, and I guess you would think they had many more functions, but honestly, they did the same things that the AirFrance seat did, just with more visual descriptions on the control panel. Not sure if I have a preference here. Do you? I'm only 5'5" tall or 165 centimeters, which means I always have a lot of leg room, and when I laid all the way down in the AirFrance seat with my head to the top, I still had some space below my feet and could stretch all the way out. In the Air Air France leg area, I felt like I had more room around my feet than in the Delta seat, and I found the thickness of the actual seat texture to lay down on more comfortable than on Delta. Neither one feel like a bed, but Air France definitely wins the comfort point. One thing that was missing on Air France compared to Delta was a little bit of privacy. The side of the seat on Air France was completely open with no way I could figure out to close it off, whereas on the Delta flight there was a mini wall that you could close off, so you really had your own little cubicle that was closed from the sides but open on the top. You can see the leg area of Delta here. It was just as long as Air France but was a little bit tighter, which made turning from one side to the other more cumbersome on the Delta flight. Oh, by the way, the Delta seat had a shoulder strap, whereas the Air France seat had a normal lap belt. Just another difference I wanted to mention, and I guess I prefer having a lap belt. One thing I really liked about the Air France seat was this little cubby space next to my head that held the headphones and allowed a nice room to hide my cables and devices so they weren't sliding around during the flight. So much nicer than the dirty little pocket in the seat back in economy, which, by the way, is where I usually sit. The headphones on Delta were on a hook next to my head, and as far as quality goes, I think both flights offered the same quality headphones. Both flights offered a warm towel before the meal service began, and I would say the warm towel on Delta was a little more robust and seemed like something you could wash and use again, whereas on Air France, it was also fabric, but a little thinner, and I think it was probably thrown away when we gave it back. Okay, now let's look at this food.
Wait a second, something exciting has happened that I want to share with you. Please give me 30 seconds to explain. As most of you know, the Very Unofficial Travel Guides is completely funded by me. I am not sponsored by any cruise line or airline or theme park. All the expenses for this channel come from my budget. And because of that, I'm always looking for new and creative ways to increase the budget, and one has just been presented to me by YouTube itself. So I was finally able to set up a membership page for the Very Unofficial Travel Guides. Many channels have these. It's a great way that you can support the people that you enjoy watching. Below the video, there's a little join button. If you click on that, you can see what the membership levels are called, like Red Sofa Regulars. Come on, you know you're a Red Sofa Regular. And here's the deal, and the part where I sound like a used car salesman. YouTube is offering me a huge bonus if I can get 100 people to join my page in the next 30 days. I don't know how I ended up on this list, but I'm not complaining because the money that they're offering is enough to pay for a cruise in an ocean view cabin. So if you enjoy watching my videos and you've ever considered helping me out in just a little extra way, please consider joining my channel now. I thank you in advance. It would be a huge help. And now back to the video.
The menu on Delta seemed elevated and much fancier than economy. Check out these selections and you can see that it is very different than what you are served in the back of the plane, with many more options. The menu on Air France seemed even more high class. They even had a little introduction to the chefs who created the menus, which I thought was pretty cool. These are the selections on Air France, and I think the options had a more exclusive feel than on Delta. This is my starter on Air France. One thing I thought was interesting is that it was listed as cream of pea soup, but it was actually like a pea soup spread for the bread, just like the lobster dip that I didn't try. Sorry. I had a nice glass of red wine, and another thing to note is the salad had toasted pine nuts, which of course is very fancy for a flight. The shrimp and cauliflower soup on Delta was also very nice, although I didn't try the shrimp, and the starter on Delta was fine. The salad had toasted pumpkin seeds, which is fancy, but you know, it's not the same thing as toasted pine nuts. The silverware on Air France was presented in this tied-up napkin, which seemed very elevated, and just like on Delta, it was real silverware made out of metal and not plastic or wooden utensils. On both airlines, before the meal was served, a small tablecloth was spread across the table made out of actual fabric, which of course is something that you never get in economy. My main course on Air France was the oven-roasted carrots with tangy potato puree and grains, which I know is the option that most of you would avoid. The presentation was only okay, and I don't think that this is something that I would order again if it was on a restaurant menu, but of course it was quite nice and very well prepared compared to what I usually usually eat on flights. I also really enjoyed the cheese selection provided on Air France, but you can always impress me with cheese. I much preferred my spinach ravioli with white wine butter and roasted butternut squash on Delta. This seemed like restaurant quality pasta, and it is something that I would order again off of a menu if I had the choice. Doesn't this look good to you? Marcus got the braised beef short rib, and this is what it looked like. What do you think? Anything look tasty? Okay, one major difference was the dessert. This was the dessert offered on Air France. That's it. They had 2 different flavors of sorbet, and they were served in these paper containers. This did not feel fancy, and I honestly was kind of confused that this is what ended the meal after seeing how elevated the rest of it was. To compare, the warm chocolate cake with berries on Delta was so much tastier, although the cheese plate seemed very basic and it was served with a paper napkin, so kind of a mix of high and normal class here on Delta. Breakfast on Delta was a kind of French toast type situation with a berry compote on top, as well as a croissant and small fruit salad. This was nice, but nowhere near as nice as the breakfast on Air France. Check out this shredded vegetables and feta cheese croissant-style breakfast sandwich, also accompanied by a fruit salad and a little orange cake as well. This was fantastic, and I kind of want one right now to tell you the truth. Very tasty. When the flight was over on Air France, the business class section had its own jetway to get us off the plane quicker, which felt very fancy, of course. On Delta, they blocked off the people from the back of the plane to let us use the main jetway first, which also felt very nice, but not quite the same effect. And that was my experience. What do you think? Is there one that is a clear winner here, and why? I guess I enjoyed both of them, and I don't necessarily have a clear winner. I have no idea when the next time will be that I'll fly in business class, so I'm just happy for any of the experiences. And just a few days after this, I boarded the brand new Royal Caribbean Utopia of the Seas cruise ship. My rundown of the entire experience is already online, and the cabin tour, the ship tour, a flashback look at Coco Cay then and now, and more will be coming here soon on the Very Unofficial Travel Guide. So once again, hit that subscribe button and check back soon.